Hello, friends. I don't know about you guys, but where I am, it is a little cold and beautiful. Whoops. But it's a little cold out. We've got a little bit of rain. So I was in the mood to paint some sunflowers. So that's what I'm going to be painting today. Let me show you. I just spilled my pencil sharpener there. This is kind of some notes I made in my sketchbook about sunflowers. So that's basically what I'm going to be doing here. I am going to kind of draw out just for placement. I like these guidelines. I'm using 140-pound cold press, by the way. This is those Artisto pads. You can also use Meeden. I love. These are the cold press 140-pound Artisto pads. And then I just label them all for the season or what have you and can go back and look at them. I love doing that. So here is my first sunflower. And I'll just draw some light guidelines here to follow, just so they kind of keep me in line and all of my petals pointing back to the center of my flower. And then maybe we'll do a little bud here of a sunflower, something like that. Okay, what I always do in my paintings is, and I'm going to be using my 8-round brush. I will link an 8-round brush for you down there. My set is sold out, but that is what I'm using. So whenever I paint, I do my best to for me, reminds me of a sunflower. That's just kind of noticeable. So the first thing I noticed is the centers are really large and they kind of have rings of dots. So the center, maybe some yellow, then going into maybe a brownish and then a really dark brown, or even in the past, many times I've used a Prussian blue for that. And they have 2 layers of petals and then big round leaves. So that's my version of a sunflower. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm working a little bit wet and wet. I've got my 2, this is my beautiful little Meeden ceramic dish. Really important to have a wash and a rinse so that when you're going into the different colors, you're not bringing with you any of the pigment from the last color you used. You don't want to get that muddy color. So I'm always washing and rinsing my brush and of course tapping off on my little towel here. And then I've got my daisy palette. So I'm going to go ahead. This is by Meeden too, by the way. I love all their ceramic pieces. They're just so nice and white and clean. A couple of you asked me recently too how I clean them. So probably a couple times a week I use these little pads by Mr. Clean, and they work great. I clean my desk off. I clean all of my white palettes and things. It does a really good job. All right, so I'm going to go in first. I think actually what I'll do is I'm going to lighten that up. Let's just erase that line a bit, just so it's not quite so dark. And the center of my flower, my sunflower, I'm going to make pretty large. So I'll start with the very center is maybe, let's see, let's go in with some of that yellow. And I'm just going to dot in, dot, just like that. And then around the outside of that, I'll go into like a sepia. There we go. And I didn't swatch this out, but that is kind of, actually it's a sienna. So sepia, sienna, you can use any of those. And I'll just kind of go around the outer edge. Again, what, for me is recognizable about sunflowers is that big, round, beautiful center. After I put in the petals, I'm going to go ahead and I'll add some of the dark Prussian blue as well. And then as I start pulling out the petals here, I'm going to go into my yellow. Just a very light version or value of that yellow. So about 50 water, 50 paint. because I can always darken up. And while the brown is wet, I'm going to go into that and widen my brush, more pressure, coming up and lift, coming up and lift. And I want that to spread a bit. Really spreading out my brush near the bottom there. A little bit more water, tap, tap, tap. Open my brush and then lift. Just keep going around. So I'm pretty much point, press, lift up. And you can make some of these fatter. You can make some of them maybe tip to the side. You know, give it your twist. This is your painting. You're painting your story, right? Point, open up the brush, pull out and up on the tip. So that petal was quite a bit fatter. Point, press. And that one's kind of spinning around. And then I just keep going. Point, press. And we're going to go in here and add a double layer. So we're going to do that too. Point, press, point, press, point, press. So there we go. We kind of have our first little layer there. Now I'm going to go into my, let's see, what green will I use? I'm going to use my tree green. Let's put it in here. I think I had a little of the darker green in there, but that's okay. And I'm mixing about 50-50. Remember, we can always go darker with watercolors. Tap, tap, tap. And let's draw the stem. Now, for me, what's so recognizable about sunflowers is those big, beautiful, bold leaves. So light pressure, I'm coming down here. And they have a little bit of a thicker stalk, probably. And I like my stems curving. The sunflowers I grew actually were pretty straight, but I like them curving. And then here I'm just touching in a bit with some, maybe some darker green, just to make it interesting. And now let's start our leaves here. So I'm going to come out, point, press, open that brush. And I want a really big fat leaf. Start about halfway. So I'm getting that width by opening my brush, by pushing onto my brush so that it opens up the belly. And go slow and just kind of take note of this, like kind of watch it. So let's do another one here. Light pressure, just using the tip of my brush, resting my hand here. And now let's do another leaf right here. So point, press, open up that belly. There we go. And now the other side, I'll go ahead and do that. Use the tip of my brush to kind of fill that in. And now I'm just adding in some interesting little edges there. And I might even tap in here. Just tap in and let it go. Like, don't go back into that. And then how about if we do one more petal coming out here, kind of facing downwards. So point, press, open up that belly. Like that. There we go. Okay, fun, fun, fun. While we're waiting for that to dry, we'll do our little, kind of like a little bud here. So I'm going to go back into that yellow we were using, and let's just kind of flicking with my wrist because this bud is closed. There we go. I think a while back, yeah, see, that's truer yellow. That is the importance, by the way, of washing your brush. I have a little bit of green in my yellow. You can always clean that out of your pans, by the way, by just maybe spraying them a little bit and either lifting the other paint out of there or using a tissue. So don't panic if your colors get a little mixed. And then I'll rinse my brush, go into that green again, and just create some leaves around that bud. So point, press. They could almost be called sepals. You know, sunflowers have those little sepals that come out here, out of the bottom. And that is a point press there as well. So there we go. I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of that. Got a little bit too much in there. So there's my little bud. I might even go in there right now and add just a little bit of brown. Like that. And let's create our stem. There we go. Easy peasy, right? Now we're going to work on our sunflower again. So I'm going to go ahead. I think I'm going to get another palette to work in because my yellow has some green in it. So I'm going to soak that up and kind of start over. And again, that's really important in watercolors because they're so transparent. I know people will ask me, how come your colors are so vibrant? They're so pure and clean. That's why, because you have to always be working with the true color, unless you're intentionally mixing. So about 50-50 water here, but I do want it a little bit darker than I've already got here. So a little bit darker value, and you can always practice your values. You want to make sure your paintings always have all the different values. So this would be a really dark value. That's about, I'm going to say that's maybe 80% pigment, 20% water. I rinse my brush off, scrape it off a bit, and now I've got that medium value. This is so important. I know I talk about this a lot, but for a beginner, this is an easy way to level up your paintings. And then there's our lightest value. So I want to make sure I include all of those in my paintings. I've got some dark, I've got mid value, and I'm going to have some really light values. And then this here, if you notice, I'm just going to pull that out a little bit using the tip of my brush. There we go. Okay. So let's go into our flower here, and we're really going to expand on these big, beautiful petals here. So I'm going to mix up a yellow, and I think I'll add just this tiny bit of orange in here, just for some contrast. Contrast is so important. And then let's go into applying that. So the same type of brush stroke, point, press. Oh, wrong one. Point, press. Point, press. Keep it simple. Point, press, and I'm kind of going in between those other petals there. Might even pick up a tiny bit more orange and kind of dot into the center there. Maybe pick up a little bit more orange. Like that. And I can soften that edge just with a thirsty brush, kind of pull it out. And there we go. So I'm gonna let that dry. And you know, your sunflower seeds may be a lot fatter, and that's perfectly fine. What's gonna make a difference here is when I let this dry, I'm gonna increase that circle in the middle, because that's, to me, very reminiscent of a sunflower. So let me give that a little shot here. This is, by the way, my handy dandy, especially in the winter heat gun. These things are fantastic. I think they're about $12 or $15. I'll link it below if you like. And in the winter, it just takes forever to dry. Okay, so I'm gonna go around the edges, and I'm gonna use a little bit of my Prussian blue and maybe some of that brown. perfect. It's almost like a black, actually. A little bit more brown. Pretty watery, so I'm going to make sure and tap off my brush. And let's go in and just dot in again. Look how fun that is. I love making these little dots. And I really like making the center of my sunflowers quite large. You may have a different expression of that, and that's totally fine. You know, make it you. This is your flower. So didn't that make a difference because I just made the center so much bigger? So it's the little things like that that can really make a difference, just to make it recognizable. My petals may be thinner than yours. It doesn't really matter, just so you have that, what's recognizable about a sunflower. So I feel like I'm pretty much done. I've got my bud here. I've got my little leaves, which are great. The last thing I could do is just add in maybe a little bit darker green here, point press. That didn't even go much darker, did it? I'm gonna pick up a little bit more green and point press, just a lot of those point presses like that. And with these different values, same with the green. So the green, I'm going to have my darkest value. Let's pick that color up. And then I wet my brush, scrape it off. Now I've got a middle value and do it again, scrape it off. Now I've got this really light value. So I want to use all those values if I can. So what I'll do right now is, this is a little bit lighter, is take a very watered down version, and you can test it on your paper, and create a leaf right here. So point, press, wiggle, 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 wiggle. That's another way to create a leaf. And I'm gonna darken that up just a tiny bit, but I wanted it to be lighter so it fades a little bit more to the background. So let's pick up a tiny bit more pigment. Wiggle, wiggle. And there you go. So that leaf right away looks like it's pushed into the background, doesn't it? And I could even, let's see, just create some other leaves here. And there you go. I'm basically done. I hope you'll paint this little sunflower and kind of, you know, paint it with what's recognizable for you. I have done sunflowers with these really big fat leaves, but they, you know, make it you. This is your painting. I could even go in the background and add some more, just make it even bigger. Totally up to you. This is your flower. All right, everybody, I hope that was fun for you. I hope that gave you some tips. And, you know, most of all, just do your own art, do you, have fun, and that's, for me, what it's all about. All right, everybody, happy painting. I will link my brushes and such, not this one because this one's sold out, but my other brushes and things I used here down below. And I do have a new Patreon account, you guys. Yay! You guys really encouraged me to do that, so thank you. Lucky me to have such wonderful supporters here. And I'm really excited for you to go there and take a little bit more in depth. There's all kinds of tiers and levels, starting at like $5 a month and going up to more. So I will hopefully see you there, and happy painting.